Chapter 14. Ding dong! Don't forget, folks, buy a family memory gift from any souvenir shop and you'll get a chance to win a Yamamoto the Bear digital dream experience. He's fuzzy and fun, and he's got all the honey. Again! Ding dong! The cluster was back aboard the cruise liner. Ray could only conclude that she'd been an awful person in a past life. Really awful. She was up on one of the top decks, poolside. Somehow, she'd ended up as one of the judges in the Slap My Sunburn competition, and a great-bellied fellow was showing her a hand-shaped welt swelling up on the back of his thigh. It looked painful, but he didn't mind. He showed it off to the judges proudly, and Ray inspected him, not sure what she was looking for. Other than an odd shape to the thumbprint, it just looked swollen and raw. The other judges nodded approvingly, and he rose to the third position in the rankings. The crowd cheered, and he raised a wobbly arm in victory. Someone had explained the rules to Ray, but she hadn't listened. As far as she could tell, it involved clambering over the amusing inflatables in the pool and slapping the pinkest, most sunburnt parts of the other contestants. Everybody was slippery with oil. A conga line hopped about the other side of the pool, and a svelte, six-packed dude hosted the event over a mic, spurring them on and delivering his best gags to the girls with least bikini. Half the crowd were filming it all on their eyelines, so it must have been tremendous fun. But they avoided Ray. She was clearly a buzzkill, and people skirted past her, looking over her head and never directly at her dour expression. She had lost track of the adjustments assigned to this cluster. Was it something to do with conflict resolution? Or was it assertiveness-based adjustments they needed? She'd forgotten. She had the notion of a plan, but it had slipped her mind now. Frankly, any adjustment would do with this lot. Take your pick. Whatever she changed was likely to be an improvement. Ray checked herself. She was getting so cynical. It was getting out of hand. The fresh addition to the cluster, Perdita, seemed all right. Intriguing woman, smart, sense of humour, good-natured. The kind of person Ray had been mates with when she was younger, before her circle of friends had drifted apart, before they set their course on career paths and marriages and families and houses, towing the corporate line like good little consumers. Fucking sellouts. Damn it. The reunion. Ray checked her calendar. It was the day after tomorrow. She still hadn't replied. Why was she so bad with dates and calendars? She'd never got the hang of planning anything more than a few hours ahead. Wasn't this reunion some sort of sporty affair? Not for her. Not now. Giving up on the contest, Ray sauntered over to the Grass Hut cocktail bar, hoping she wouldn't have to drink her whiskey from a coconut shell. The bar drone informed her, regrettably, that they weren't serving alcohol at this time due to an outbreak of a vomiting bug, which was aggravated by alcohol. The drone blamed the catering at the Concerto dining room, whose standards had dropped considerably. Ray declined the soda-based alternative, even though it came in a coconut shell, and cast her eyes about, looking for a clue. Amongst the poolside revelry, she caught sight of the heavy guy she'd just judged in the competition. He was cavorting around, pretending to be a penguin or something. People around him were in hysterics. There were 4 or 5 tiny yellow ducklings following him in a clumsy line, intent on going wherever he wobbled. After a few turns around the sunbeds, he jumped into the pool. The ducklings plopped in after him, one by one, to bob in his considerable wake. Ray sighed. The alcohol ban. And now this. There was little doubt about it. The simulation was making it quite clear. There was a pregnancy. Perdita hadn't been honest with her. Ray was going to have to say something after the session. Oh, such a pity. She'd actually liked her, and now she'd have to ask Perdita not to come again. Her wretched boss would throw a Benny, but there was no question. They couldn't have a pregnancy in the cluster. Still, while she was here, she'd better get on with things. Bringing up her hollow map, Ray noted the abundance of eateries, carveries, restaurants, grills and cafes aboard the cruise ship. The passengers didn't have to walk more than a few steps while enduring the agony of not being 100% full up. Even a half-assed panmatech who's watching the clock, who just wants to get home and sit in front of the telly, will seek out the restaurants in a sim. It's day one, week one stuff. Metastasis 101. There couldn't be a more ideal setting for a cluster to express itself. Ray soon discovered that the competitive theme she'd encountered at the Calypso poolside bar and grill, the harrowing Slap My Sunburn contest, also ran throughout the restaurant zones of the simulation, except it was much fiercer. There were reports of rodents being released in the opposition's kitchens, customers being bribed to give one-star reviews to rival restaurants, and Ray discovered that somebody had started reprogramming the waiter drone's software. A waiter at Sabatini's had taken her dessert order only to return with a half-deflated beach ball, which it served with a flourish. The drone proceeded to recite Hamlet's "Alas, poor Yorick" speech at half speed, whilst it held the beach ball aloft in a dramatic pose. Ray noticed that its robotic thumb was broken. It looked like something had split it down the middle. And it wasn't just Sabatini's. Apparently, all the restaurants were hacking into each other's mainframes and subsystems, playing merry hell with the programming. Nobody was getting the food they ordered. They sat parties of 15 around a single table for two. Soup was poured onto the punters' laps. The waiter drones spoke Latin for no good reason. It was pandemonium. In one incident at the concerto dining room, an elderly couple nearly caught a light when the maitre d'honneur flambéed their niçoise salad. They said they'd never look at an anchovy the same way again. It was a classic manifestation of the old sibling rivalry dynamic. This chirpy, affable cluster had a cutthroat instinct they'd never face up to. The whole process was entirely unconscious, and it was Ray's job to correct it. The official line was to give the warring parties some space and allow them to express their feelings. In theory, she should provide a safe place to listen to their protests and help them move on to pastures new, where they could deal with whatever new pecking order would arise. But that was way too convoluted. Ray needed a shortcut. She didn't have time for all that mollycoddling. The airing of grievances and the holding of hands was for another panmotech, one with more time and patience than Ray could muster. If it was a new hierarchy they needed, then it was a new hierarchy they'd get. Years of metastasis had taught her how to cut through the crap, which was why she'd adopted the mythic role of the food critic. Under the bright lights of the group Sanofi Paribas Empress Studios, Ray was trying to interrupt a live interview with a representative from the Residential Development Finance Corp Limited. Sat next to her, the 30-something executive with dark, pockmarked skin was being interviewed by the ship's D-list presenter, Denny O'Daniels. The executive was pepping up the corporation's history. So that's how, over the years, RDFC has emerged as a financial conglomerate with its presence in the entire gamut of financial services, including banking, insurance, life, and non-life, asset management, real estate venture capital, and, more recently, education loans. Denny O'Daniels nodded. I've always thought of RDFC as the kind of corporation that invests in people as much as it invests in financial services. It was like they were discussing a fond family member. Well, that's right, Denny. RDFC's unrelenting focus on corporate governance and our clarity of vision percolate right through the organisation. Trust, integrity, transparency, and professional service are the 4 pillars of the brand RDFC. But there's a 5th, the most important of all. People. Ray interrupted them. She thought she'd figured out a diplomatic way of butting in. Yeah, that's so true. Which is why we've named our new culinary prize the RDFC People's Restaurant of the Year. Just before they went on air, Denny O'Daniels had received a last-minute briefing that Ray was joining his chat show. There weren't a lot of interesting stories aboard the group Sanofi Paribas Empress, and he and his small team of researchers were always scraping the bottom of the barrel. Last week, he'd spent 45 minutes interviewing a passenger who'd attempted the ship's record for jogging laps around the upper deck. They'd done over 400 when a funny-shaped cloud distracted them and they lost count. There'd been no question whether Denny would interview a professional food critic at short notice. He turned to Ray and extended an arm to introduce her to a non-existent studio audience, seeking the prompter to remind himself of her name. We're so pleased you could be with us this afternoon, Miss Quickfrown. Corridor, I understand you're one of those lucky devils who are paid to eat out. Canned laughter. But seriously, as a food critic, don't you get sick of eating out? He had another 25 minutes of airtime to fill and needed to string this out as long as possible. No, Denny, I don't, Ray answered, especially when the food is as good as it is here, which is why I'm pleased to announce that the winner of the RDFC People's Restaurant of the Year goes to, he interrupted her, in a bid to delay what was sure to be the climactic part of his interview. We'll be announcing the winner in just a few minutes, folks, so don't go anywhere. If you want the lowdown on where to chow down, stay tuned. So, Miss Corridor, what's your favourite meal? Chips. And the best chips we found aboard were, tell me, do you prefer those fat double-fried jacket wedges, or are you more of a twirly-whirly fries kind of girl? Neither. Just chips. You must have eaten in some pretty grim places in your time. What's the worst? Have you got any kitchen horror stories you can share with us? No, not really. So awful, you've probably had them wiped from your memory, huh? More canned laughter. Can't blame you. I once ate a chicken burger that was so bad I took one bite and went straight to a membooth to erase all recollection of the taste. Only problem was, I was still hungry when I came round, so I stopped for a burger at the chicken joint next door. Hysterical canned laughter. But seriously, you food critics are famous for keeping a low profile in the restaurants you review. Have you ever been found out? No, never. Are you ever tempted to tell the waiter you're a critic just so you get a better meal? No. Have you met any famous chefs? No. What's the weirdest thing you've eaten? Chips. Chips? They were a bit longer than the ones I'm used to. Have you ever had food poisoning? No. Fly in the soup? No. Can you tell me what the best thing about being a food critic is? The food. And the worst? The food. Who is the best food critic, in your humble opinion? Remember, you can't say yourself. Canned laughter. Who's your biggest influence? I don't read reviews. Any? Nope. So, what made you want to become a food critic? The chips. Denny O'Daniels shot an appalled look at a member of his research team. He bit the bullet and resigned himself to returning to his interview with the RDFC executive. So, I suppose we should just go ahead and find out the results of the RDFC People's Restaurant of the Year, Denny. Yes, that's a good idea. So, without further ado, Miss Corridor, can you take us through the runners-up? Who came in third place? There are no runners-up, Denny. Just a winner. One winner. But, oh, come on. There must be some runners-up. Some kind of shortlist. Not in this competition, there isn't, Denny. Right, then. OK. So, who is the winner of the RDFC People's Restaurant of the Year? Well, seeing as you've asked, it's the Crown Wheelhouse and Grill who won it this year, Denny. It was a decisive victory. There can be no doubt about that. They're absolutely, unarguably and objectively speaking, the best restaurant aboard the Groupe Sanofi Paribas Empress. So, the Crown Wheelhouse and Grill has it. And although the other restaurants are probably disappointed, they're just going to have to face up to facts and get over it. They're not as good, and they can never expect to be. It's probably best if they stick to the dishes they know well, and leave it at that. So, congratulations to all the guys and girls down there at the Crown Wheelhouse. I'm sure they'll be over the moon. Yes, Denny, congratulations indeed. Have you got a message for them? Anything you'd like to say? No, not really. I see. And finally, can I ask you what dish it was that the guys down at the Crown Wheelhouse wowed you with? Sure, it was a bowl of chips, Denny. They were just how I like them. Well, thanks again. It's been really great having you on the show this afternoon. Just fantastic. Yeah, no worries. Listen, I need to get going. Is it all right if I just... Oh, sure. Go right ahead. Ray got up and left. Don't mind us. Don't mind us at all. Denny O'Daniels gathered his patience in one quick breath and turned back to the executive. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't RDFC's wide product range include a robust deposits mobilisation scheme?